Look at the problem of substance abuse and addiction. It is rampant and it is destroying lives. And when people are addicted to some substances, they are predisposed to other forms of criminality.
The attitudes and character that our children are displaying, some of them, is way out of line. If you talk about the dressing, culture, you see children now, some of them are even almost going nude, and they say, "Oh, it's okay." It's not okay. It's not okay because that's not our culture. But the children, some of the children now, they are like, "Where is this one coming from? Oh, she's outdated." And I say, guess what? That culture you're trying to import, it's not favorable. There are some things you can import, there are some that you don't import. You leave them where they are because it will not help you, it will destroy you.
In order for a society to operate functionally and effectively, they must ensure and maintain strict and constant adherence to the various components of their norms and values that govern our culture. Therefore, the social institutions, such as the family, which shoulders the responsibility of procreation and orientation of new ones, should not be lost in its function of socialization, as values is inseparable from our culture and should therefore be cherished and relished.
Inseparable from our culture. Interesting concept. Thank you, NTA Jazz. When we're listening to one of the respondents or the person interviewed, he said children are more familiar with house helps and social media than they are with their parents and guardians. We will talk about that. Will form the crux of our conversation with Mrs. Rosemary Ojochemeni Oshikoya, the former Commissioner of Education in Kogi State. But she's many things. She's doing many things. A woman of many interesting parts. It's great to have your company on Weekend Deal.
Thank you for having me here today. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Erosion of family values in Nigeria. How far so far? Where are we now?
I listened to the Prof with keen interest and the reports that have come from several parts of Nigeria and a lot much more that was not talked about. And I am one of the beneficiaries of having good parenting from the home, which is the first primary agent of socialization. But like we all learned in social studies, where the primary agent of socialization fail, there are other corrective measures that are put in place. And so there's also the role which I think we need to touch about is what happens when it failed, like it has failed so now. And rather than pass up the buck, then we move on to the next step. How do we go back to what it should be? And one of the good points to make is that of incentives. What incentive do I have as a parent to make sure that my children are raised? And it will take us back to the policy framework. I listened to one of the comments that was made, and I would like to point out that the structural framework, the policy framework for what the education sector is to deliver is in place. Number one, how everybody who are even stakeholders within the sector understand what is Nigeria's philosophy for education will take us back to why we have some of the gaps. If you ask the everyday teacher in, let's say, the basic school, the primary school, is the person aware of the purpose and the outputs of Nigeria for education? So we go on to say, if one of the expectation of what happens to a child that is educated in Nigeria is that you will fit into the society, then I would know that the character value orientation of that individual and everything that Prof had already listed is in place. So if that is not in place, it means from the primary agent of socialization all the way to from the home to the school and every other thing that has to do with the child, from the child is born until the child become an adult, shows that the child, if it fails, means the child is not well adjusted. And so it is not even just about your physical age, because you become at the age of puberty, you can have a baby. But what happens when that fails? So incentives comes in. I don't know if you recall, there was a time in Nigeria.
Incentive for the teacher, for the
incentive
parent.
for everybody, because it takes us back to punitive measures. What does the law provide should happen to anyone who falls short of the standard? So you see, we don't need to speak with every sense of fairness and justice. Means if I steal, If I am raised to become a thief, once upon a time, that incentive is you gather up thieves somewhere, armed robbers somewhere, and you shoot them in public. And every parent goes back home and says, don't spoil my name. Thou shalt not steal. You see, so there's the other side. And for me, I agree with you totally that the primary agent of socialization, the home, is where everybody gets flogged. But who controls everything else that goes? It takes us back to the domain of government, because the institutions that are available for moral values, ensuring justice, ensuring that the child is trained, ensuring that the child is corrected, which takes us back to even how do I correct a child? Juvenile courts, how many of them are available? For the few that we have up and about, what do they do? What is the goal of everybody you want to? Is the court, is the prison and all those correctional centers, are they available? Are they adequate? And then what is the output? Do they really reform the individual who goes over there? Or are we just having chains of broken down one? So I think at this point, how do we get out of this? How do we sustain what we have done? Takes us back to who are the models we are having. I am happy Prof touched on that. The home fails, but the home itself is influenced by several factors. And part of the factor, like he did say, is what do I teach my child at home? Nigeria is a secular country. And so if Nigeria is a secular country, irrespective of the orientation and religious bias of the people who at one point or the other are in certain places, have we all subscribed to the nation, to the ideal of nationhood? Who is a Nigerian?
How is it not? I do know that the government has a major responsibility, but we also, before that child, the government is not going to be touching on the child at some levels. It's the home. And I learned somewhere that a parent was telling the teacher or proprietress that my child spends more time with you than with me. So we have a joint responsibility. I do know that the child spends time in school, but it shouldn't be more. If more so, it should be more at home. I do know
the child gets to school,
but the home.
Can I touch on that? The child wakes up in the morning, possibly resumes school at 8 o'clock. And the child leaves schools on the average. If I go to a public school, I leave school between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock. If I go to a private school, possibly my child is kept all the way to 2 o'clock and I bring in other lessons and the child comes home by 4 o'clock. All the hours in between, the evening hours, the night hours, the morning hours before I get, and classroom is a bit regimented to what you do about that time. But yesterday I was driving across Abuja town and I saw this very fine new car. Adults definitely driving, passenger, co-passenger. And to my shock, right there in the middle of the road, the adult wind down and threw a polythene bag out of the bag. Abuja road. And then I realized by the time I got to around local, I had to stop the guy. I parked beside him and then I honked and he wind down. And then I said, why would you litter the streets? And he looked at me and he said, sorry. Could he come back, drive back and pick that up? Now, once upon a time when I was growing up on the streets of Kaduna, there were structures put up by government that when you litter, immediately you are fined, you are picked up. Every vehicle must have that. What has government done? If I leave it to the school to teach you environmental values, and I come to the street and everybody on the street litters on the street, the society itself raises the child. It's an African value that the society raises of the child. Now let's speak another one.
The past.
Well, it is expected that it is still part of our norm. That we have chosen a generation woke up sometime and then spite the ways of their fathers and decide it is not the norm, does not take it that some parts of Nigeria and some groups, maybe not in the majority, actually do practice it and all that. But why do I say the larger role of that all? For instance, look at the bad habits we have. If you've driven across the world or you've traveled across the world, certain level of irresponsibility and is not allowed on the streets. You have to queue just right beside us here, Ghana, South Africa, and the rest of them. You find communities that are organized and everyone is held accountable to deliver on what, that's why I said, what are our national values. In Nigeria, not far ago, I remember in the 80s, I was still a child, the concept of war against indiscipline is not just spoken about. It is enforced, and every Nigerian know, behave yourself and stand on a queue where you are. I am saying that the overall responsibility of managing all the various agents of socialization falls back on government.
Okay.
Because there are people who are already put in place, there are institutions, and then coordinating these institutions and making sense of putting our mind on what do we want to see at the end of the day. For instance,
okay, you talked about enforcement. Something leads to enforcement. You put something in place or put to obey. Then when they fail, you enforce. There's reward. To enforce, there must be something good that comes out of doing it right, and there's punishment or consequence for doing it wrong. Okay, let us line that and enter the next level. If there's lack of enforcement, where does that leave us? And then let's talk about the way forward. What do we do now? See where we are. We're discussing this, and as we're talking, many homes, hundreds of homes are tuning in because they are seeing it, it's happening. Some will say our hands completely tied. Can each person take a responsibility and abide by it? Because all of us working together may get us where we want to be faster. Or what do you say?
First, I go back again to the structures that allow you to misbehave and the structures that encourage you to align. And you see, I keep coming back to, I could fail as a parent. But if I am a parent in isolation of parents, for instance, in an urban society like Abuja, you mind my business, I mind my business. What concerns you, what I do. But you find that at the point at which we collectively hold ourselves accountable, means that the whole essence of organization of a normal urban one places a lot more responsibility on the one who can oversee all of us. And so I am not saying that juvenile courts were allowed. You pick up somebody who is not, that's why I said the whole education philosophy is that we want to raise up a child that is adjusted into the society, that can fit in. And for us to achieve that goal, from when the child is born to when the Nigerian philosophy of education, the policy on education has articulated those goals. But the responsibility is why we go to the agents of socialization, that the home is one and the first and part of it. But there are other people, because when all of these work together well, and that brings us to the place of political will. Because you as a home person do not control the local government administrator who controls the person who is in the courts, who controls the policeman who will do the arrest and ensure that there's a prosecution, do not control the person who is in the juvenile center who will do the correction.
I'll take you back a bit.
And then the religious person.
Those juvenile courts are not practical. They are not there today. The courts
but
are
we said that is the next step.
Okay.
The next step is...
Can I ask you something before I get to that step? Quickly away from what he or she has done all its life, all his or her life. It has been happening. It's no longer teenagers or young adults. It's happening even with older people. What is the role of moral courage? Who should bring it up?
You know, the tragedy we have in our world today is that people who are not well parented are the parents of other people who are minors. Wow. And so you find that if you go to other parts of the world where the holistic development of the child is concerned and where social welfare, you see all these structures are coming up. What is the role of social welfare?
We have social welfare in Nigeria.
Exactly. That takes it back to what I'm saying. Nigeria's overall budgets for governments, running and maintaining government, is very huge. And then at the end of the day, if we are sitting here and we are agreeing that because these failures of government manifested in the various aspects of government is no longer, okay, let's do nothing about that. But yet, government bill for providing these services keeps going higher. Then at which point do we hold somebody responsible? Because the person who takes care of social welfare, why should you be a parent if you are not qualified to be a parent? Are you getting the whole idea? Why don't you get punished for not being a parent? The whole framework of the society, as we have it, is geared to ensure that everybody is incentivized to do their role at that level. So it's not as we have it now. So for us to go back takes us back to the political will to agree on what kind of society should we have. And the primary person you do that, thank God, is an election year, is the people you put there to make those responsibilities. They decide what happens. And if every government entity understands the purpose for which they are there and they are delivering, we will not put too much home and too much hold on the home itself. Now, let me ask, Nigeria has a lot of street children. We know now that about 10 to 14 million Nigeria or more, as the case is because of COVID-19 and all of that, are on the streets. A lot of them have no parents. Just now we're talking about the marginates and people who officially are street orphans and street urchins. The number is increasing.
About 13 million.
Exactly. put that again to the people in the villages across Nigeria who are orphaned and villages are dumping home for them, you will find at the end of the day that we have a big vacuum, which creates a big room for social welfare, a big room for social development. But what is the incentive? Why should I behave well? If there is no punishment, there is no deterrence to put in place. Why should I, as a parent, not give you any excuse? If tomorrow my child and I can pull up connections and said, please cover this up. Have you written when that small child in Kano died? And you're hearing incidences of abuses you hear on the social media and all the level of cover-ups, if you look at that very carefully. And so if at the end of the day we must build a society that works for everybody, which is the vision of all of us, then those agents of socialization will all leave. Don't focus on the home alone. Because if I have no incentive to behave well, why should I not keep covering up my children?
But can I say something? In times past, when we parents used to tell their children, despite all the things that are in place today, children were schooling abroad. The prof said he was schooling abroad. He has gone to see Western culture at its highest, not just in London, America, but in Switzerland and Germany as well. So we've always had people go out, see foreign countries, come back. They are normal. It's a plus. We're combining our culture with what they get outside. But nowadays, people have not even left these shores. They're already doing something else here. Why do people tend to take only what is negative or what is seen as negative rather than taking the positive things? Many good things are happening overseas.
Can I compare two societies? Because even if you have not traveled, you've watched them on television. One of the society is, have you watched Indian movies?
I used to enjoy them a lot.
Thank you. How many of them dress all the time like white people? Exactly. Who encouraged them that this is 2022? But the average local take pride in dressing in the way they are, even if sometimes and oftentimes they would want to dress worse. And I read something that changed my perception when I was a young adult. Interestingly, it's written by Professor Pat Otomi. And then he said something. He said the generation that left. I read that article and it has stayed with me. There was a time in Nigeria that a lot of people came, and then some of our forefathers believed that our cultural orientation, our value systems were substandard to that of the Oyibo man. And so very soon they feel like, why do you see that a lot of our children progressively down to adults and their parents begin to feel that to eat akpu and then to eat banga soup and to eat all of that is local? Because somebody told us that it was not right. There were a few people who now want to champion what is the positive and good part. A lot of people critique, why do you dress so like this? And then I said, because don't wear. My mother taught me. I learned to tie 2 wrappers when I was 10 years old. I learned to tie my hair. So there have to be those agents of promotion of those values. There are a lot of foods I ate as a child within the north that are no longer there again. So you see, as in my own capacity as a humanitarian running NGOs and working with young adults, we try to bring back some of this food culture, some of these values in what we do. But that again, you see, I'm careful to say it is not what NGOs like what we do in Ladi Memorial Foundation do is to promote, to engender, and to help to sensitize to.
But I'll come to that.
But it is not just that alone.
I want to just take this feature that's talking about corruption and values. When we come back, let's talk about
Nigeria, a country blessed with a citizenry that treasures spiritual and moral values such as love, equity, patriotism, discipline, loyalty, to mention a few, sadly is now experiencing a rapid decline in our value system.
Your religion is your character. What we have nowadays is we don't have characters anymore. People lack character, they lack integrity. And that's why you find that you can't even vouch for anybody.
We clergy men, or we say imam, we need to go back to where we are coming from. So where we are coming from is to start preaching or teaching the word of God all the time in the mosques and everywhere that we have the people. We gather people to give them piece of advice about the word of God.
Day in, day out, congregants converge in their various churches and mosques, expecting to receive messages that remind them of the need to pursue positive values, to be good neighbors, and by extension, responsible citizens in the society.
Our so-called religion leaders, they are not uniting us at all. All they are after is their own pockets. And whoever that says is a religion leader, they should not play politics. Most of them are playing politics. At the churches, they don't pray, they don't preach the Bible, the right thing in the Bible. Even in the mosque, they be telling us do this and do that. If they want to be politicians, let them know they are politicians. And they want to be religious leaders. But to me, I think the religious leaders should be neutral.
Messages that are being passed in all these our sanctuary places, sometimes it affects a lot. It affects the community. I only call on the leader to teach love and peace to the society so that love lives.
Some have attributed the degeneration of our value system to the change in the message of hope to that of prosperity coming from our various religious institutions.
Prosperity in the place of worship should not offer all, should not come rampant than that of teaching of morality in the center of a place of worship.
Where will you spend eternity? Most people are afraid to preach such lessons in the church, so they don't lose their followers.
The big question now is, can our religious leaders change the narrative by returning to teachings and practices that will correct the ills in the society?
It depends on how you see their messages. You know, we process information differently. It's left for you. After listening to the messages of our Imam, I'm a Christian, but I do watch Islamic programs, preaching, their seminars, I listen, I watch their movies and everything. It's really educating and inspiring. It depends on how you process the information given to you.
If there is a real paracetamol, there must be a fake paracetamol as well. Then everybody are not the same. There are some that might be teaching the right thing and some that might be doing it like politics. So maybe they are doing it for member, or what they benefit from what they are doing, and that is why there are many separation and many denominations as well.
I will say the messages that have been coming from our religious pulpit to a greater extent are messages that should unite us as a people and to create a one solid Nigeria. But where the foundation is faulty, that is, you're coming from a family where that does not believe in one Nigeria, where you grew up as an Hausa man and your parent continually creates images and teachings and ideas that tells you that a Yoruba man can never stand by you, can never hold your hands and help you to cross the bridge. Whatever you hear from the religious pulpit when you grow up may not really hold water.
Even as the country continues her battle with corruption sweeping through the nation, our spiritual leaders should be more intentional in their sermons to redirect the mindset of the citizenry to a course of positive values for the benefit of all.
A role in who we become, what we take out of it, because many say that Nigeria is a very religious country, but in spite of that, we're talking about our value system being eroded today. Dr. Mohammed Suleiman, the president of the Association of Nigerian Artists, great to have you on the show. Erosion of values in Nigeria, what's your take?
My name is Mohammed Suleiman, not Dr. Mohammed Suleiman. And I would say, basically I have listened all throughout, like I've been sitting and listening. Where I will put it to first is where we prioritize what cultural values are, where those values have eroded us. But understandably, you should be able to see that while the Nigerian youth, the ordinary youth, has been faced by so many, say, all of those vices on the street. Like he's not so much say directly involved in them, but the things you see from television, the things you hear from music, lyrical contents and the rest. And you see that also the Nigerian families, governments, so many everywhere are not also helping matters because the cultural institutions have not been so empowered. Reason is, when you go out of this country, you see, for instance, if you're in Trinidad and Tobago, for instance, they say there's what they call the Emancipation Day. Emancipation Day means that day they remember that they are Africans and they're dedicated to, from dress culture to food culture to everything. We're in Nigeria, we're sitting on it. We're not doing anything about it. And then also...
Like our cultural days?
Yeah, like days that... No, we have festivals. We have days... They have days that are dedicated to...
national.
Yes. So, now, but what is happening in Nigeria is like I would do credit to Otumba Roshere and the National Council for Arts and Culture, the LCT and Culture, and all of these places here. These are so very, very insignificant. What I'm trying to say is that the government is not like making it a national holiday for everybody. That is one. And then secondly, you also travel to maybe say to the US and everywhere. You'll find out that the persons, the blacks that are there, try to like say we are blacks from Africa. But what is the problem? Why are we always trying to look like the outsiders when those that are outside are trying to reflect what is inside?
What we have here.
So the problem is from within because we must pay attention to the arts, the culture of the Nigerian people.
And take pride in it. The problem is, according to Muhammad, he says, we want to be like them, they want to be like us. Mrs. Rosemary, tell us, we want to be like them. Do we? They want to be like us. Do they? What is it in us that they like? What is it about them that we want to entrench?
First of all, the worrisome thing for me as Nigeria is most time everywhere you go in the world, people look at you as a Nigerian as one of the corruption headquarters of the world. And if that is the values can be positive and negative values as we have them. And then it becomes a thing of national shame that we are people who are unruly. We are people who do not behave well. We are the people who do not commit to excellence as opposed to what it used to be before in the days of our forefathers where we come up with a whole lot of integrity, pride, a whole lot of examples and some of those role models we have. I would want to say that we want to be like them because in some of their societies, you are not allowed to get away with anything that is wrong. And so that incentivizes everybody to commit to a sense of national goal. You find again that an American will tell you with a sense of pride, I am an American, and the values that he tried to espouse to you are the things that they stand for. They are positive. And you know that even them, how many American presidents in their history have had to abdicate office because of moral issues? We heard about the Nixon Gate saga. We've heard about the so-called near case of Monica Lewinsky. So you find that moral values are the essence of our faith. It's the essence of who we are. It is a sense of our so-called connection to God, a sense of right and wrong. But if we are not able to enforce them and put up the necessary deterrents, then everybody can get away with it.
Which we are.
So in Nigeria, we are at a point where everybody is getting away with everything. It shows that there is no sufficient political will. We do not have enough role models to tell us, and when people are coming out for anything, we are not holding them accountable. So I think we being like them could we please falsely copy the positive part.
This topic, we can't wrap it up today. It's so engaging, and like you said, it's topical. But we need to take a break now, and then we'll go for sports.
Race James! And Chelsea lead again. Lined up by Barnes for Castagne.